Hi everyone, hope you all are doing good. Welcome to yet another episode of Level Up Prodcast. And I'm Malthi, your host. I'm a product executive and a product leadership coach. I'm looking forward to have this interesting conversation with my today's guest, Chaitra Chidanand. Hi Chaitra, welcome to this episode of Level Up Prodcast.
Hi, Malti. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. You remember, Chaitra, you and I had met at IIT Kharagpur, I think a few years back, at an entrepreneurship event. And since then, we've been in touch. And I'm so glad that you could make it today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I mean, Biswa Kalyan Rath. That was what we were, I think that was the evening show that we were attending, and next day was all both our speaker sessions. So it was a
Yes.
good day to bond.
Yes, absolutely. And just to, for the for the starters, Chaitra is a serial entrepreneur, and interestingly, her last two ventures have been in the fintech space, also a space where I have probably spent like about 7 8 years now. And her latest venture is called Salt. She's a Stanford alumni and is a design thinking champion. Now, having said all this, this definitely says that she has very extensive experience in design and discovery and technology. So, today's conversation's theme is definitely also going to be around that. Okay, so let's begin. Chaitra, I probably the users would be very delighted to hear your journey in your own words. Why don't we start there?
Okay. So I am a Bangalorean and I'm right now in Bangalore as well. Grew up here, did the typical South Indian thing of engineering and MBA. I think I fell in love with programming when I was 10 years old. So since then, wanted to be a programmer. That was my first job, started as a software engineer. During that time, I also serendipitously got an opportunity to work with a founder who wanted to set up a development office in Bangalore. So I kind of became his co-founder. It was purely serendipity that really got me a taste for startups and business, and I found it quite interesting, and that led me to apply to business school. So Stanford happened. Stanford is a great place for, I think, anybody who is interested in entrepreneurship. Silicon Valley, it's like a very like a petri dish of entrepreneurship, right? So that was a fantastic 2 years spent over there. Very interesting new experiences. And since then, I think the largely you can summarize my background before starting Simple as having been in the 0 to 1 journeys of different products within both small and large companies. For example, from an human AI, like literally a inspection system that mimics the human eye, which was deployed in Apple's factories, to creating iPad app for NFL, the National Football League,
Mm-hmm.
with a small studio in Los Angeles. So I got these varied set of experiences of building and launching products from scratch, and that was deliberate. My intention was always to start something on my own, and I had this theory that I need to collect as many diverse experiences as possible, and that will give me the most learning. And that's what I did. So, and when I was starting out, actually, I moved back to India to do working capital loans to small businesses in 2014-15, and chickened out of it because I realized that that was a much harder business to build. And I think as I was setting up my life in India, I was having so many struggles with payments. And this was in 2015 when like today, it feels really impossible to imagine the scenario. But 50% mobile transactions on mobile commerce platforms used to fail in 2015. 50%, right? On Book My Show, every other ticket would fail and the next ticket I would book. That was the scene then. So naturally, this whole idea of creating a kata based product was born because my mother's life was going on fine with her kata. Everybody was making a entry in their tab and they would settle the bill once in a week or 15 days. So then the question was, why can't we do the same thing for online? And that was how Simple was born. Simple was my first fintech startup. I mean, first startup. And after I did Simple for about 5 years, and some of the things that I worked on in my last year at Simple led me to discover this, both the need and the opportunity for financial services with an angle of basically intentionally built and distributed to women. is how I would describe it. So the idea is not to create a girls' school, but the idea is to create a co-ed school where you make sure that at least 50% of your customers are, women, right? That's what Salt is. That was the vision that Salt was born with, to bridge the gender gap in finance. Yeah, we're going through our struggles of being a company in that 0 to 1 journey right now, and we'll talk more about it as we go through your questions, Malvi.
Yeah, thank you, Chitra, for sharing that. Very profound. And I think, as you rightly said, most of these entrepreneurship journey, I think where it seeds is when you kind of hit the problem at home, kind of, and that's where I think the most effective solutions also are born. So
Correct.
thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and so probably the first question I have, I mean, you kind of spoke about multiple products that you have built in and how a lot of them kind of emerged with your own personal interaction where you kind of identified this as a problem statements. Now typically when you have done a lot of 0 to 1 journey, right? So I would like to probably double down a little bit there. When you typically start with the problem statement, you have your own assumptions, you have your own hypothesis, and based on which you basically do a solution identification and go more deeper into it. So as part of your whole product discovery process, especially in your 0 to 1 stage, Chaitra, when you were kind of meeting with your users, did you have any aha moments where they either completely were contrarian to your assumptions or hypothesis, or something which is very very eluding? I mean, either way of the spectrum, were there any such aha moments which we you had encountered your during your journey?
I mean, many, Malti. Like I don't know. I think how many, and it's a continuous process, right? It's a
Correct.
continuous process. I keep having aha moments every few months, and I'll give you a few examples. I'll give you a few examples that to me were, unusual. One was the what led me to start Salt, right? So when I was at Simple, I was trying to conceptualize the offline solution for Simple, which is basically something we were working with 10 Minute, which is a grocery store chain, another startup in Bangalore, and in one of these prestige type apartments. And that gave me the opportunity for the first time to be physically interacting with customers, right? So otherwise, as a digital entrepreneur, you don't get to observe your customers in their natural setting using your product, right? A lot of times. So that happened, and I was really surprised by, until then I grew up thinking, I think both of us, right? We come from families where probably we can call ourselves privileged because we didn't have parents trying to put us down or saying that, we didn't grow up with any gender differences baked into our mind. So I had no idea that the world worked differently or men and women work differently until then. And even if you told me, I would not believe it, right? But for the first
Okay.
time, out of 10 out of 10 people that I would speak to, so the model, the what I was doing was I was going and introducing Simple to people, pretending to be an intern and saying that, hey, this is the product, this is what it takes to sign up, would you like to use it, etc. There was a binary difference, like a black and white difference between how men reacted to it and women reacted to it. And I couldn't deny that when data is staring you in the face, right? So men had a binary reaction. They would be like either yes, makes sense, come, like they would be like, ha ha, abhi KYC kar lete, aa jao. And they'll take you to their house and fill up the KYC and whatever. Or they would be, no, 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 never. My father has told me कि बेटा जिंदगी में credit कभी मत लेना, so therefore they will never sign up. Or the other most common reason given used to be, I work in IT, I know the security loopholes of digital payments, so I will never use digital payments. So these irrational no's and rational yeses, right? That was how men felt. Women, on the other hand, 10 out of 10 used to be like, yeah, very interesting, makes sense, okay, kind of like, let me think about it and get back to you types. And the most common reason given used to be that, let me talk to my husband and come back. Obviously the feminist in me was like, what, why do you need to talk to your husband to sign up for Simple? But then here's where I put my gender to use, and I invited myself over to their homes for coffee because I really wanted to get to the bottom of it. And then I discovered that feminism was not a threat. It was their way of buying more time, because I realized
Mhm.
that women don't like being sold things. They're buyers. That was a very powerful insight for me. The difference between how men and women avail products or services. I realized that women don't like being sold to. They don't trust the sales, right? They're like, okay, sure, you're saying it's great. Obviously, it's your product. And then the solution for it, I had no idea. That emerged serendipitously much later. So there was this one site out of 10 places where we did, my interns did a Diwali, Dasra Pe, they did a stall, and, they created what you in marketing terms would call as brand awareness.
Mhm.
And typically, when the interns would leave, they would onboard about 25% of the audience and leave. And then single digit per week customer new signups used to happen. But there was this, out of the 10 sites, there was one site where double digit signups were happening. And when we looked at it, it seemed like they were largely women. So it didn't make sense. And later on, when I dug deep into it, right, this was a few months later, 3, 4 months later or something. Then I realized it was this site where Dasra Mela pe this thing had happened, and post Diwali the sign up started happening. So when I went and investigated, I realized what had happened was the equivalent of brand awareness, then social proof, because people started talking to each other, finding out what is this thing called Simple, आपके लिए कैसे चल रहा है, how does it work for you, and they saw the value in it, and therefore they came and became buyers of that service, right? That was a very powerful insight. And then I did a lot of research into Flipkart versus Mintra, Amazon versus diapers.com, Flipkart, Amazon versus Nika. Why is it that certain brands succeed despite their counterparts having spent more money? So Flipkart spent, I think, $2 billion to trying to crack fashion. They finally ended up acquiring Mintra for $1 billion. I think it's largely because when businesses build, or they sell products that they think largely women will consume, from day one, they do things a little differently. Whether it is in the product, whether it's in the return policy, for example, whether it is in the way products are marketed and distributed. So, influencer led marketing, right? Basically, things that create trust and that are not salesy is, I think, what works with women. And businesses naturally do that when they are selling products that they know largely women will buy. But when they think that they're selling to all, they do the typical thing, and they're not able to crack the female customer base in the beginning. Women come. Today, if you go and look at Amazon Big Basket, it's probably 50-50. Right? I don't have the data, but I'm guessing. But that is because it has taken a longer time to build that social proof, brand awareness, and then they have come. So if as a business you want to accelerate it, it makes sense to sort of be aware of these things and build it. And then the natural question is, why should we accelerate it? How does it matter? I think there is a product, there's a business insight I want to share, is women are more lucrative customers. So you will have, as a product person, you're the CEO of your product, right? That's what a product manager is and should be. So they need to keep an eye on not only shipping beautiful products but also making sure that it's delivering business value. And revenues is a very strong metric, right? So women, they once they become your customers, they open up their entire share of wallet to you. I saw that in Simple. So women, for instance, they would, men would largely use Simple on one brand where they've onboarded. Women, on the other hand, tended to be, once they discover how it works, they would use it on multiple brands, right? So they make use of the product fully. At Salt, I see this. So the average order value on Salt is 10 times that of our other general counterparts, and it's largely because of the women. 50% of our customers at Salt are women. On Digital Gold, the average order value is 800 to 1,000, and other people who sell Digital Gold, from what I know, report a 80 to 100 rupee order average order value. Similarly, on mutual funds, our average SIP is about 14,000 rupees. The nationwide average is about 2,400, right? So, and I've also seen this anecdotally, like women start with a 5,000 rupee investment, then within 1 or 2 months they go to 50,000. We have had somebody do 5 lakhs. We've in fact had a bunch of HNI people who have brought their husbands also, saying that, and they've come and purchased PMSs with us, right? So women are very lucrative customers to go after early on as a business person. Lower churn, higher wallet share, which means higher revenue and higher loyalty. As long as you deliver your promise as a good product, good service, etc.
Wow, that's like really insightful. And being a woman myself, I can relate to so many of the things which you just said, right? For example, just talking about simple, pretty much every grocery app that I use or anywhere I have to do a make a payment, I actually look in the buy now pay later. Is that an option? Because I'm so used to it.
Thank you.
Right. So the loyalty part is definitely very very insightful. And I would say just this whole segment of cohort you kind of spoke about, it's like a literally a giveaway insight, Chaitra. So uh, thank you.
I
That's
just want to
really.
add, I want to add one thing, Malti, which I forgot to mention, is the
Yeah.
propagation. I think
Mm-hmm.
we women naturally tend to talk to each other about, they tell many people about what is working for them. So,
Yes.
from a marketing perspective, it saves you a lot of cost. If you focus on women and get them on board, you're able to grow at a far lower cost in the long run because they do the job of word of mouth. And I'll give you, in Salt's case, a number for it. So, the money personality test that Salt created, about 250,000 people have taken it so far. And
Mm-hmm.
using that test, so the test went viral, right? So we were able to measure the virality factor or the network effects factor. And we saw that for women, the factor was 4.5, meaning every woman was referring the test to four and a half more people, right? Not necessarily women only, but four and a half more people. Every For men, that was, I think, one. And on average, they say that for men, the network effects, there's some study that's been done. For men, it's zero point 0.5 in the world, meaning every male happy customer brings half a customer. What we saw with women was four and a half customers, right? And I think that to me is like a very, very powerful reason why you should focus on women.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of very, very synonym with, which is spoken about this particular cohort. And in fact, the other day I was in this WhatsApp group, which is for, a few women leaders, and somebody wanted to buy something. So she asked a question, and you're right. Somebody said that I have recently tried this local brand. And 2 weeks later, there are four of us who said, "Hey, you know what? We also purchased something from there, and it was thank you for sharing that." So completely, completely relate to that.
Yeah.
Now, that's a very interesting discovery anecdote, Chaitra, that you kind of shared, right? And especially since, as you spoke about in Salt, one of your primary cohort is women. That how they can become more aware about their investments and finances, right? So when you are trying to take all these learnings from your discovery part of things, and when you try to design something for women or whoever cohort, and as you rightly said, you are working on a finance product. One is that it is really boring. It is not as exciting as I'm going and buying something. It's not like an e-commerce app which gives me a natural dopamine to say that yes, I'm very excited about it, right? So it's money, which is not which is boring. I know that. Second is the most important act is that trust, right? Because I'm kind of investing my money with you, so the trust factor. So understanding your user is one part of it, but baking that in terms of your design. And I remember you and I at some point of time spoke about that, especially when you're designing products for women, right? There are a lot of additional elements that you spoke about. So I would actually want you to talk about that what are some of those elements that you keep in mind at the center when you are designing these products.
So I think the way I would put it is this way, right? That one of the main things I have learned as a product person is the fallacy of armchair innovation. So when I say armchair innovation, it's me, my opinion about how the product should look, and largely I succumb to then confirmation bias. I talk to a few people around me and I start building it, right? Because I think as human beings generally, the tend we get, as professionals, we get fulfillment out of shipping things, out of building things. So the natural urge is to go and start creating. There is a little resistance to spend time in the problem space itself. And I think that has been the most biggest learning I've had as a product builder is when, and I have made this mistake and I continue to make this mistake, right? Because it's the most natural tendency. But wherever I've had disproportionate success, it is when I have taken the time to immerse myself in the problem space itself. And there is a very clear structure you can follow when you're immersing yourself in the problem space. One is this gender insight is whether you're building for women or not, keep women as your at the center of whatever you're building. You are forced to create a superior product because and I'll tell you how it works, right? So this is principle number one I've discovered. If you're doing your research and you're talking to, let's say, 100 people, make sure at least 70 to 80% of them are women, because when you talk to women you get a much more diverse set of needs and perspectives, because by nature women have diverse sets of needs. My needs will be different from, let's say, somebody else who's not a who's a work who's a stay at home parent, right? Or somebody who's something else, right? So women have more diversity built in to their lifestyles, and that mirrors in the the way they will project their needs when you do your research. Men are a little more homogeneous. So you talk to two or three men, 20% men, you get to know roughly what is the need that they have, right? So that is one simple insight is do your research. When you're doing it, make sure intentionally you have at least 70 to 80% women in that research, irrespective of what you're building. Second is structure your research into 4 or 5 steps. First one is observation. So observe the environment. Observe your customer in the environment in which your product will live or what it wants to replace. To give you an example, when I was doing simple ka offline solution ka design, I spent crazy number of hours and days and weeks just sitting next to a physical POS in a restaurant, in a cafe, at a supermarket, like various places where physical POSs are. I would tell the people so that they don't get freaked out. Why is this human being just standing and watching the cash machine? And just stand and observe. I'll tell you a few simple insights that came out to me just through this observation. I noticed that even before somebody shows up at the till, they have decided which instrument to pay with. So whether it's cash or card or UPI, they are pre-decided. So you're not going to be able to change their mind at the point of sale. It means that you have to have won their loyalty or their remembrance even before, right? Whether it is through a banner that you place there or by making your product so amazing, that's up to you. So that was one. Second was I timed how much it takes each of these transactions to get processed. I realized that the fastest was cards, and that was about 30 seconds, 30 to 35 seconds. The longest was cash, and back then actually the longest was UPI because internet was not that great. So
Oh,
it would take
okay.
1.5 to 2 minutes and people would be doing this trying to catch the signal. So that made me realize that if I want to create something that people will think of before they show up at the pause, and given the time they are sensitive to, how long they spend over there, because everybody gets flustered when change is not there. The cashier is the first person and then everybody behind you, right? So everybody is sensitive to that time. So the product metric success metric I set for myself was 3 seconds. I was like, it has to be at least 10 times better than what is currently the best, then only somebody will switch and make
Hmm.
this the default. So what if it's 30 seconds is the best, then it has to be 3 seconds. And
Hmm.
that was how, and therefore some of the decisions I made downstream, which was facial recognition and how it works, so that it almost like you show up and your face is the identifier in some sense. All those things were a fallout of realizing what the core USP needs to be so that your product gets adopted, right? Then observation also made me realize the role of the cashier, that the cashier, if the line builds up, then that person gets the most flustered, and therefore they will dissuade you from using anything that is going to put pressure on them, right? So
Hmm.
observation teaches you so much. Second is impersonation. So in that transaction, whatever product you're building, there will be usually minimum of two parties in a transaction, and most often there'll be an invisible third party also. So, as a product person, figure out what that is and impersonate that person's role. So, in this case, in this example, it could be the person who is the payee, the customer, the shopper. It could be the cashier. And in that simple case, there was this invisible person was the back office accountant, which meant that at the end of the day, if the amounts don't tally, then that person's life gets affected and they affect the cashier's life, and the cashier will dissuade this person. So at simple, the tallying feature, meaning the reconciliation for digital merchants, used to happen once a month, but for the physical merchants I realized I'll have to give a daily recon. And that insight I would have completely missed if I had missed that invisible person. And how did I identify the invisible person? Because the third principle in this design thinking framework is follow the money, meaning in any transaction just follow the money. I come, I buy, I pay, okay, the cashier receives it, then what happens till the end of that transaction? When you follow the money, you discover who are all the people whose life gets affected in this transaction, and the invisible people come out, and there will be some agenda that the invisible people have. Sometimes it won't affect your innovation, sometimes it will, right? So I think these are some very basic things that you can do as a product builder so that you can prevent yourself from doing armchair innovation. Now apply this to salt, right? The same principles. I realized that three things. One is when I started talking to customers for research, I used to ask them, okay, because I wanted to know what is your relationship with money, what are you doing with it today, or what are you not doing with it today, how are you managing it or not. So I used to conduct these 1 hour long conversations with people for my research, and I would ask them this: what's your relationship with money like? What did you see how your parents' relationship with money growing up? How do you think that has impacted you either positively or negatively? That the questions were along those lines, right? Fairly broad based and open ended. At the end of 1 hour, everybody used to thank me. They would be like, first time I'm thinking about money, first time I'm talking about money. And when they started thanking me, I realized that this itself needs to be productized. How do I productize a conversation about money? And that led me to create the psychometric, which is the money personality test that I told you went viral, right?
Wow.
Because that became the product version of that interview, which gets people thinking about what is their relationship with money, answering a few questions of how they engage with money today, which then mirrors back to them like a MBTI or a Linda Goodman, whatever, that tells you that what is your relationship with money. And when people read that, that really makes them go, wow, yeah, this is so correct, this is me. And it also gives them the mean to start taking charge. And the next thing, that example, is when they decide that they want to take charge, the first point where they get stuck is how much money comes in, how much goes out. They don't really know. And their anxiety always stems from that discomfort of knowing how much is coming in, how much is going out, where is it going out, is it enough, am I doing the right things. So the irony was the people who are doing the most to manage their money also seem to be the most anxious about it, because they just never had that any way to know ki what you're doing is right or wrong, right? So that is what led me to the next thing, which was that, okay, the first step is not to build fancy advice or anything. The first step is really to give them an easy tool through which they can start building a functional relationship with money, so that it starts dismantling the dysfunctional relationship they have with money. And the idea was very simple, that hey, why don't you start tracking your expenses every day for a month or 2 months? That will start giving you a sense ki kahan ja raha hai, kitna ja raha hai. And then the question was, okay, but it's so much effort, who's going to do that homework? How will you even get them to do that homework for a week or 2 weeks? Then I asked myself, what is the easiest app that everybody use, right? What is the most easy UI? It was WhatsApp. Whether it's my
Hmm.
dad, whether it's my child, like anybody can send a message quickly. So that was how the natural language method of input for budgeting was born because of this observation, that the biggest barrier for using money manager or anything was the mehnat, or journaling, etc., was the mehnat. So made it easy. Then second barrier was permissions, and this directly ties to the trust element that you're talking about. So Walnut and some of these other apps that were there, that used to ask SMS or email permission or bank statement permission, people, especially, and their women, were reluctant to give permissions. They were like, who are you, what are you going to do with my data? So I realized that without demonstrating utility first, if you ask for permissions, then only a small subset will come. You will lose a lot of people that otherwise might have become your customers. So we flipped it and we said that don't give any permissions, you manually track. You can track however you want. You want to track every expense, track every expense. You want to track multiple expenses in a one shot. We gave them hashtag Uber 20, 200, hashtag Vadapav 20. So you just do a running list. You want to track in bulk, like you want to say roughly this week I spent 5,000. Do that. So by inverting this whole thing, by making it like literally like a money journal where everybody can do tracking according to their flavor, we won the customer's trust. And now what did that lead to? Within 1 2 weeks of doing this, or even a few days, many customers would message us saying, hey, can you read my SMS? Hey, can you read my email? Can I give you my bank statement? Because they realize the utility of it, and then they want to automate it, right? So you sort of win their trust in that fashion.
Wow, I think those are some really amazing, I would say, observations that has led to some beautiful products. I would say, first of all, get them hooked onto it. As you said, this whole conversational part of it, right? To start with awareness, and then you kind of get used to it with, and you see the value, right? So I think the core part, the way I see, is that how do you show them the value based on the observations that you had been done at their part, right? In fact, there is a in one of the companies where I used to work earlier, one of the things which they said, which it took me a little bit of time, but I deeply understood, was follow me homes. That means you go and spend time at your customer's place and don't only listen at all the symptoms, all the pain points that your customer is telling you, but actually observe the ecosystem. How is your customer behaving in that setup? And everything from impersonation to persuasion to dissuasion, everything that you spoke about is very very, I would say, developing deep empathy towards your customers, right? And those are some brilliant examples, right? So I think I want to kind of double down a little bit on this conversational aspect, and I actually, after we spoke last time, I actually used it in salt, and it is amazing, right? I mean, I was very surprised that I just give lipstick and I give the name, and it automatically categorizes it, and the way it kind of updates in the passbook. And I would definitely ask all the listeners to basically download it and explore that. But Chaitra, here it is not only design is definitely, empathy and design is one part of it, but there is a very underlying aspect of technology and intelligence and NLP stuff like that, which you're using, right? And I know you come from a very very interesting combination of brilliance of design and brilliance of technology, right? So when you started to build this, or as you kind of evolved with this feature, what were some of the challenges, or what were some of the ways it kind of mattered in the way you were doing your product development, or what were your learnings from that?
Many, because see, we were doing this NLP based budgeting tool before ChatGPT, before even we knew about ChatGPT. Right, this was a concept that we came up with about 2.5 years back, and we had already piloted it in May of 2022. Right, that was when we had released it and people had started using it. The first challenge was natural language. Large language models are expensive, and how do you go about it, right? But I think one is you need to have a, look, I'm not a data scientist myself, but I have a fantastic partner in my colleague who is, works with me very closely on these POCs. He was the brain behind the psychometric, the money personality test. He was also the brain behind Passbook. And
Okay.
really, like, the for me, I'll tell you how I approach it as a product person a design person, whatever, is from the user's lens. Once I've understood the problem space, I present it to to this guy. I told him that I need to be able to type in natural language, and the categorization needs to happen smartly. You can pick up a few keywords and accordingly do it, right? So the first challenge was figuring out which off the shelf model is going to do it, so that we can at least POC it, which he was able to do. There are enough and more libraries that are available, enough and more models that are available, which open source ones that people can use to experiment. So he found a tool called Rasa, which was a conversational bot, which gave us the ability to POC this product. And once we POC'd it, we realized that there are so many complexities. We realized only once we got the first rudimentary version out, right? For example, I mean, many complexities. One example is like people have Shanta stores, spelling mistakes people can make when they're typing in. Secondly, the names can be so like Shanta stores can be whatever, grocery, something else, it could be anything. And then third thing is for different people want it in different, like I want jamun to go into um, food eating out, ordering in. For you it might be the fruit, and therefore you might want it to go into groceries. But my co-founder Aditi, her pet's name is Jamu, so she would want it to go into pet care, right? So as we discovered these things, then we started drilling it down into, and then you married tech possibilities to what are the customer needs, right? And then you prioritize them, saying, Acha, this is an acute need, without this the product is going to fail. Then you do a little extra mehnat on tech. The example for that was this categorization and classification. We realized that if I'm going to do MCC code based classification, then might as well not build this budgeting tool, because there are enough and more apps which already do that, and people don't relate to that type of rigid classification. First of all, it's wrong. A lot of it is wrong, but also they don't relate. So then we realized that we'll need tags, meaning we need to have intelligent categories, but we'll also need to give you people the ability to create their own categories. So that for we called those the tags, and the tags we picked it up from the long text that the user types. So if I say shitty pizza with friends 500, put a sad emoji, then pizza is picked up as a tag, friends is picked up as a tag. So tomorrow I can go and filter for friends and see how much have I spent with friends in the last month. I can go and see how much have I spent on pizza or coffee. They need not be, they will be overlapping sets, but at least I'll start getting then a sense of how am I spending behaviors. But I also have categories. Categories are not overlapping. So there, it'll all add up to the 200. So that was one thing. Then the last thing was the user level model. So this is again where technology pairs with, we realized that one of the things people don't want to do is, let's say I classify Shanta stores for me is my local grocer, but for you, let's say it is your um, the person who supplies stuff for your pets, right? Maybe. So then you wanted to go to pet care, I wanted to go to groceries. I don't want to keep correcting that every time. And there can never be a universal model, especially in India, where the same name will not apply, right? Like, sure, Amazon, yes, it can go to a global model, but these small names can't. So that realization led to the bifurcation of the model into two layers. So we have a user level model and we have a global model, and both train differently. And the cost of training both is also different. So my global model, which is expensive to train, trains occasionally, once a month or once in a few weeks. But my user level model, which trains daily, but it only trains incrementally, and therefore the cost is almost negligent. And the effect of the two is that the user feels like this is magic, because two or three times I tell the bot, or even once I tell the bot, I correct the bot saying that, Acha, Shanta stores put it for groceries. Next time onwards, it will remember that for me, right? Versus for you, it might go to pet care. So I think that's why getting to know what is that non-negotiable feature in your product, if you don't have that, then the utility will diminish significantly, right? That 20% of those features, that will diminish 80% of the utility if they don't exist. That's a function of, again, iteration, observation, and then you apply tech smartly. because we didn't go into it thinking that, huh, we have AI is fancy technology, companies are funding it, let us build AI into this. It was it was the customer, the need of the problem that dictated what technology should be applied to solve this.
Yeah, I mean, bringing in the business context and I think a lot of things that you said, right, and getting to know evaluation of what it takes to solve for this problem, especially the magnitude of the problem, right? I think you beautifully said that across the global level and at the user level. Cleansing up of the data because the same name has different meaning for different users, and then classifying it. Chaitra, I want to kind of go a little bit more deeper here. You are wearing the product person's or the product builder's cap here, and you have a wonderful counterpart in your data scientist or your data tech lead over there. Now, how much of the need was it for you or any product manager in your team to know the details of the model itself? So were they kind of were involved in more in terms of training the model, evaluating the model, or they were more on the sidelines of bringing in more the business aspect of things, customer aspects of things? Because there is a lot of unknown here, right? And as we all are traveling through this evolution where we are saying that, okay, for building AI powered products, does it mean anything different for the product managers? Do they need to acquire any new skills? I probably want you to kind of share your experience and what would be your advice there.
Okay, so it's different for different people, Malti, and to a certain extent, it is the person's personality and will dictate this also. Sometimes the situation itself will demand, right? But in my experience, I have seen that you need to let the experts be the experts, which means the engineers, the data scientists. Um, they need to know it in depth. But I think they also, where I have seen the best success, is when the technical person has a decent enough business sense, and where the business person has a decent enough technical sense. That is when the jugalbandi, the partnership, is magical. Because when the business person tries to go too much into the tech, that leads to over engineering, because the technical person is anyways inclined towards over engineering, and you also add to it, then it leads to unnecessary over engineering. If this person has no business sense, then again it leads to a different kind of then it actually leads to not over engineering, but you might think that something is unservable too soon. Meaning, because the first reaction is that, oh, LLMs are so expensive, oh, it'll be too. You will come to that conclusion if you don't understand the real business need, right? Because then only you will be able to bifurcate that, hey, this is how I can cut the costs down by making sure that the high cost thing happens less frequently, the low cost thing happens more frequently, and therefore I can cater to this business need. So that is the right answer in my view, is that the business person needs to have a sufficient enough familiarity, and they should not be intimidated by the tech, little bit of understanding, and vice versa, a decent amount of business sense, problem space sense. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. I think you just kind of killed it. I mean, I love the word jugalbandi that you said, right? I mean, you need to know so that you can continue to have a healthy dialogue for the right kind of solution. But at the same time, you should not be overstepping on each other's shoes.
Correct.
Right? Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Chaitra, that those were some really very, very amazing nuggets, and I loved those examples. How did you kind of connected the problems to the solutions you designed, right? But in a setup, especially you are kind of still in a very early journey of your product. So with limited resources, how do you continue to do user discoveries? Is it more a one-time affair? Is it a continuous affair? How do you guys go about that?
Oh, that's a very important question, and honestly, that's where the devil is, right? Because even in my own story at Salt, I had the luxury of doing whatever I described to you in the early days. As the
Hmm.
team grew and the PMs, I hired PMs, and then I moved out towards GTM and my co-founder started running product, etc. It did become harder. It became harder, and it required conscious effort on the part of all of us as product builders to continue to stay in touch with the customer. So one of the a few things that we did was we empower our customer success person. Right, every week we hear what she has to say in terms of what are the most common issues reported by users, what are the things that they are saying, how are they saying it, because it's users, it's not about literally taking the user for their word, but it's about understanding what the user is saying but not saying also, right? So I think continuously by being open, I think the only thing we have done is between um, Aditi, my two product managers, Disha and Megha, they have maintained, I'm saying as we've advanced further, right? They have maintained that openness to listen from everyone, both internal and external. And they also have some rituals, like they will call customers. Sometimes I go and mandate it. I say that, hey, I need you all to do user calling for X number of cohorts. Kind of because it's very easy for PMs to get caught up in the day-to-day sprint delivery, and it's difficult because that itself takes up so much of their time. So
Correct.
a little bit of internal driven, little bit of external driven. I think that combination of making sure you stay in touch with the customers has worked well, reasonably well for us. I wouldn't say we have nailed it yet. Ideally, I would like to get to a point where there's a dedicated user research person, and I think in India that practice is very uncommon. But now, with all the hindsight, benefit of hindsight that I have, that is one thing I would probably do differently, is have a specialist who knows how to do user research, who knows how to distill that information, how to make sure that it is not going to be biased by just a few voices that they have heard, right? So I think that also is a area of expertise that I would invest in, um, to make sure that I minimize the blind spots as I go along, and that becomes a great partner to the product and the design team. The user research person then becomes a partner there. I think that exact workflow we have not yet mastered or figured out. I think there is room for more optimization there. Maybe in a few months' time or in years' time, if you call me back on this, I'll be able to give tippani on that particular optimized. Um,
Yeah, you are right. I mean, spending on that user research person on that team, I think, is one of the greatest thing that I would say, a greatest gift that a product leadership team in any company
yeah.
can give to their product managers as well as to their users, right? And I would say some of these companies who have invested on that actually continue to remain very, very innovative and continue to stay very relevant for their customers. So till then, at least making sure that bringing it into your process, making this as a practice, I'm sure kind of goes a long way in success of any product team. Yeah. Wow, Chaitra, those were some really, really interesting things. And every time I, have these conversations with you, I always go back much more enlightened, knowing, extracting so much more from you. Just the same case, this conversation today. So thank you so much for taking the time out. And I hope you also enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Yes, yes, Malti. I mean, when hearing yourself speak distills your thoughts for yourself also, right? So definitely enjoyed it, and as usual, you're always very kind with your words. Thank you.
No, no, definitely. Thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward, continue to, cheer you from the sidelines for whatever work that you're doing and all your endeavors. So all the best, and look forward to host you again in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our hope and dream is to create a AI to grow this, what I described the budgeting tool into being a pocket assistant, an AI powered pocket assistant, a Jarvis of sorts for money, where you can not only talk about budgeting, but you can go and ask questions about which products to buy, what do people like me do, you can do natural language queries on your own data, you can find out what other people like you are doing, and thereby use this tool to help you make financial decisions more and more in a more and more stress-free manner, to prevent mis-selling, especially in this country where a lot of products are mis-sold through distributors who are incentivized by commissions that are a little warped. So I think that's the mission. Look forward to delivering that to our users, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yes, thank you. And that sounds really, really very, very conversational, very interesting, and very, very something that I would definitely look forward to. And all the best again, Chaitra. Continue.